Okay. Welcome to the UW demonstration sites at the UW Hearing Center for Inclusion. My name is Rena Marie Leon Guerrero. And first, we'd like to share that the demonstration sites at the UW Hearing Center continue to focus on highlighting inclusionary practices through partnership with districts and featured schools, which graciously share their journey and invite visitors for a transformational visit experience. And although our demonstration sites partners feature inclusionary practices, this year we do have two categories of demonstration sites. The first is a continuation of our inclusionary practices or IP demonstration sites. And this year we welcome 6 districts and 10 sites that are focused on reducing restraint and eliminating isolation, or RREI sites. We just want to highlight that all of our sites are highlighting in inclusionary practices and are at different points of their journey. And just to give a little bit of context for our overall partnership and statewide efforts, the UW Hearing Center is contracted by OSPI, and we're a member of the Inclusionary Practices Technical Assistance Network, or IPTN. People may have formerly known that as the Inclusionary Practices Project, and now we're currently the IPTN. And here you can scan this QR code to learn a little bit more about our partners. And on this slide, you can see our diverse partnerships there too. Great. And the IPTN really envisions a future where every student in Washington State has improved access to rigorous and standards-based instruction and post-secondary outcomes. And we also recognize that each of our sites is on their own journey, and then those high leverage moves really align to the individual school, center, and district context. But what we have learned along the way too is that for schools and centers to have lasting impacts at that district scale and sustainability are very critical. At this point, I'm just really honored to be able to turn it over to Barb Sattler and the incredible team of Central Valley Early Learning Center, and they are going to share a little bit more about their journey.
Great. Thank you, Rena. My name is Barb Sattler, and I'm the program director here for the Central Valley School District around our early childhood programs. And I've been in this position for the last 18 years. The exciting work that we've been doing over the last 5 to 6 years around inclusionary practices has been not only a huge undertaking, but absolutely the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my career around early learning. So I have a great team here with me today, so I'll let them introduce themselves one by one, and then we'll get started.
Hi, my name is Angela Haberman, and I am the assistant principal here at the Early Learning Program.
I'm Adrienne Roberts, and I'm the education specialist and pyramid model coach for our program.
And I'm Leslie Helms. I'm the family, community, and transitions component specialist for the program.
Great, thank you. So just a quick look at what our building looks like. We are kind of known across the state as converting an old grocery store into a high quality early learning building. We've been in our building now since 2016, so it's still relatively new, but the plus is it was built and designed specifically for early learning, impacted in an already existing transition into a non-bond building, is like how we like to express it. So we wanted to start today with just giving you a quick overview of what it looks like here at the early learning programs at Central Valley. We currently have 590 funded slots through ECAP, and those are all school day slots. We have a staff of roughly 150. We have 22 classrooms here at our ELC. The building actually is designed with 25 classrooms, a gym, a commons, shared workspace, and individual office spaces for folks to have quiet, confidential meetings with families. We currently run about an $11.9 million yearly budget. In that programming, we have the opportunity to have our family support service staff. There's 14 of those staff that work with 40 families. Again, that building was designed to help us utilize that individual space so families have that confidential opportunity to talk with folks about their needs. We currently have just recently in the last year moved to a completely inclusive model with 18 students in most classrooms, 12 of those typical peers or 6 students on IEP, so that 70-30 rich mix with a complete push in SLP, OT, and special services program moved into those classrooms. We spoke quickly a little bit about what's here in our building. We also have locations outside in our elementary schools. We have 3 classrooms at one elementary school, Liberty Creek Elementary, 2 at Progress Elementary, 2 at South Pines Elementary, and 2 at University Elementary. Our district is divided into a central, east, and west community, and we wanted to make sure that families had a equitable lens and were able to access preschool in their smaller community within our district. So we ensured that was a big push for our district to make sure that we were making access to preschool for families throughout our entire district without having to come to one central location. In addition, it's starting to meet our need as we grow based on our population in our district and our need to meet that potentially soon coming eligibility for all preschoolers in the state of Washington mix. The why behind why we started inclusion comes in a variety of different ways. I think the first part of the conversation came when OSPI visited Central Valley and said, look, you have a great opportunity to have some really progressive work here around what's best for preschool students and how we can show some pretty successful data around what does inclusion really look like. So that conversation started us talking about, like, what do we look like on a big picture? How do we support our students, our families, and our communities? One of the huge pieces came from parents, specifically parents who were coming into our building and our program and seeing isolated programs. So a classroom down the hall that might have been a special ed classroom only, a classroom down the hall that might have had some paid preschool and some working connection dollars and some ECAP funds in them. And an opportunity to for families to really start asking us questions as to why and how students were in each individual different program, instead of here's what program looks like and here's where all the students were. We started to kind of look at our data then and see where are the students becoming the most successful? How does that look? What's in that environment? What is differing from that classroom to the next classroom? And we came up with a variety of conclusions, everything from the duration of the day, the curriculum that was designed, the resources that went in and out of the classroom. The students were just a small piece of that. It really was our programmatic practices behind the lens that really made the difference in those classrooms. And so we were able to review that and kind of look at that through a different lens once we started asking ourselves, how and what does full inclusion look like in preschool? So that process of design took a very long time in the sense of we used 2 years to kind of design and plan how it was going to look, what it was going to look like. We toured multiple school districts and programs to see what does inclusion look like in smaller school districts. What does it look like in larger school districts? How are they meeting kind of those IDA expectations around students having the least restrictive environment? How are you getting those related services to support those kids around their needs in their classroom? We worked around that culture change of how do you prepare a large staff such as ours to kind of go out with the old and in with the new, which can be very, very traumatic because we all know change is difficult at times. We had to negotiate union contracts as we redesigned what it would look like in programs. We had to look at, like, what was the best design per classroom? What are those students' needs? And how do you look at class size? And there's no one size fits all that basically tells you what's the best for early learning. It was truly just us trying to figure out how was that going to work for our community and how was that going to work in our lens that we were looking through. So I'm going to tell you the story that prompted my big push to push inclusion for Central Valley. And as a champion for inclusionary practices, it really was one of those visits where you were not only shocked, stunned, sad, overwhelmed, everything above when it came to emotions. We had a year where we had a set of twins in our program. Prior to inclusion, the twins had been placed in 2 different classrooms. One was a special needs only classroom, and the one was what we would call a typical peer classroom. And we pride ourselves here at Central Valley at making sure that we had universal practices around what we offered to students when it came to basic needs and environment. We forgot one component, which is that the component around how we collect data and use the Teaching Strategies Gold system throughout the state, whether it's through our Head Start programs, whether it's through ECAP, didn't encompass or include necessarily those students on IEPs and or those students in separate classrooms. So other than those students basically seeing each other maybe out on the playground for large motor time, maybe spending a little time on outside events that we had here in our building, those students really didn't have the opportunity to all get the same rich interventions when it came to those tools, supports, and implementing of our Teaching Strategies Gold, which was a high program that collected data and was able to give us a clear picture of where students were succeeding, where they were falling behind, how we needed to implement practices, and what we needed to do next. So after our first set of parent-teacher conferences, where of course the student on IEP gets a progress report, the parents get to sit down with the teacher and discuss what goals are being, what goals were addressed, were they meeting them, weren't they meeting them? And really just kind of a snapshot of the delays that their one child had. Then they walked down the hall for their next parent-teacher conference that really embedded the practice of what do we look at in the whole child? Where is this child exceeding? What should we expect next? What are the things they're doing really well? What are the things they're kind of struggling on? What are the things that they're developmentally on track for? And they received this rich piece of information about their child. And as they were leaving, they asked if they could have a moment of my time. And when they walked in, they sat down and said, we are blessed that our children are here. We're blessed that we know that our child who has been identified with special needs has an opportunity to be in your program. But we're really, really confused as to why our student with the most amount of delays gets the least amount of support, intervention, data, all of those kinds of things about what we know about preschoolers, which is that whole child is really important. Those social and emotional skills embedded in everything else that we're looking at is just as important as meeting those goals that are on an IEP. And here's our other child who's in this classroom down the hall that we now know more than we ever knew about our child. And we're a little confused as to why that wasn't a little bit more equitable, or the lens was a little bit clearer as to why everybody would get that. So that really started our conversation of, that's right, like, why are we automatically saying if this child comes into our program in this pot of money or in this program, this is what they're going to get. And if this child comes into our program under this pot of money, this is what they're going to get. So we started to eliminate that kind of process and say, anyone that walks in the front door for Central Valley School District is in preschool. And what does preschool look like? It looks exactly the same for all students. And then we embed those interventions and supports in those classrooms for those students with individual needs. So that's where the why started. And the why really came from those parents asking us those direct questions, like, why doesn't my child have those rich interventions and learnings? Why does my child with special needs not have access to their friends that they can learn from, just like they were at home with their siblings? Why does my typical child's teacher have this rich set of data and observations that show me everything they can do? And my child with special needs, we reviewed where they were going with their goals and only those identified areas of concerns. And why does my typical child have a list of requirements to ensure that they're getting the highest best practice model with standards and expectations? And my child with special needs has programming that has no standard expectations other than meeting those individual needs first. So that's how we started our conversation around why. So I'll give you a quick little picture as to how those questions from those parents started our process. From 2019 to 2020, we started engaging in our ESSA grant with OSPI, specifically around those early childhood special ed needs and what we could do to identify those students and into our inclusionary practice, and what was our inclusionary practice going to be. The interesting thing we all know about 2020 is that COVID hit us, and that changed the cycle of what school looked like for some of us for a short amount of time or a longer amount of time. But what it did for us here at Central Valley is it allowed us to really embed some professional development for all staff, instead of just taking that ESSA grant into a small amount of classrooms and really trying to embed what was best practice in a few classrooms. We were able to take a step back and say, we have all this amount of time. where we don't have necessarily students in chairs, but we can actually work with the adults and get them prepared to address what it looked like to do high quality inclusion. In 21-22, we tried a variety of different models in classrooms just to kind of figure out what was best practice, the ratio of students, the ratio of staff support, part day versus full day, alternative attendance schedules, students in a 70-30 mix, students in a 50-50 mix, students in classrooms as low as 8 students in the classroom and as high as 18. So we tried on a variety of different hats during that 21-22 year. 22-24, we really continue to look at those models and say what is working, really dissect where the data was showing kids were being successful, really taking a look at how does it change based on what we as the adults and the supports and interventions that come into the classroom help make that successful for those students. So we moved into this full year with the 24-25 school year, and this was the year we took the leap. We eliminated any of that kind of world of a little bit offs of maybe less kids, a 50-50 ratio, a different kind of push-in model. And what we basically said is every one of our classrooms is a high quality, early learning, inclusive environment. So every one of them is going to be exactly the same with those universal supports. From there, then what we were going to do is ensure that whatever students were in those individual classrooms, those interventions and supports would be in that push-in model to make sure that those individual needs were being met. So we eliminated kind of that process of your kids, my kids. We eliminated that process of what does placement really need to be. And we were really allowed to be able to say, here's what the environment looks like, and we're going to make the environment fit for all kids. And what I can say that we're moving forward with is that this is a constant job of adapting and changing and adjusting and exploring and enhancing. Because as we know, each time you add another student with another set of needs into the environment is what has to adjust, not the student. So it is a lot of hands-on work, a lot of conversations, a lot of communications, a lot of adjusting and changing. But each time that we get back to the table to talk about something that has arisen, we realize that we have more and more success than we do any kinds of mini little fires that we have to put out. So we're really learning from that practice in a pretty extensive model. So we talked about what does that inclusion what is successful in inclusion, and really looking at those universal supports and interventions. Like I stated earlier, in 2020 and 21, we were able to really blanket our PD across all staff so that we had a universal expectation of tier 1, 2, and 3 supports for all environments. Making sure that every environment had access to those resources was essential. So if we were using some sort of social and emotional curriculum in this classroom, we wanted to make sure that everyone had access to it so that no one had to borrow from the next room and take away from another child, that everybody had access to those tools. So we were able to use some of our grant funds to make sure that those universal 1, 2 supports, not only were they blanketed across every environment, but everyone had their own individual resource so that we didn't have to be borrowing or stretching those kinds of resources out. That rich professional development for staff continued to strengthen our overall environments. The more that people understood the concept around what does inclusion mean, it's not just that students are in the classroom and you're going to serve them and I'm going to serve them. It really became this rich environment where everyone understood their role in that inclusionary practice. That interdisciplinary team that supports that collaboration around student success was key to our success for inclusion. And what we meant by that is that every member of that team has an opportunity to collaborate about what's going on in that room, from the special service staff to the OTs, PTs, SLPs, to the general education staff, to the our family support system that comes in and helps the families. That team of understanding what the needs of that individual classroom and how to address those needs is essential in making inclusion work. Allowing our staff to wrestle with concerns and issues and questions in a supportive and productive process. When you do a system like ours, where you went from a very clear linear process where each one of us was in our own kind of silo into this everything is in one environment, there was a lot of mixed emotions, concerns, issues, fears, trust, all those kinds of things. And having an open dialogue through those interdisciplinary teams to support staff with those concerns has been huge. Allowing their voices to be heard, allowing to have regular conversations so that we support that has been one of the keys to our success as we move through this process. The biggest part of our inclusion success is aligning our district MTSS system to our ESSA Inclusionary Championships grant. And what we did with that was really take that smooth transition of our processes, procedures, and data, and be able to align that with what is in our K-12 system. And one of those examples was our SST process. So we attached that form here for you to see. And what that looks like is that rich intervention of tier 1, 2, and 3 supports. So those meetings of identifying the need and the concern, addressing those with different ways of collecting the data, revisiting a second time, coming together, saying what is successful, what is not, how is the support for the student working, what is it looking like, are we meeting those needs, do we need to adjust those, and then really moving on to that next system and that next step, which would be that third family student support team meeting, where we allowed everyone to come back together and say, are the interventions and supports that we're putting into the classroom to support the child, are they successful? Are we meeting those things that we need to meet? Or is it truly time to look at whether this child should be moved on to an evaluation process to see if they identify for special services? So that gives us an opportunity to really align that with what rolled right into our K-3 system, which was getting those students into the classroom, giving them those rich tier 1, 2, and 3 supports and those interventions prior to moving directly to an IEP, so that we could really see and have that child show us where their strengths are, and having that team or that process behind that with all those professionals to say, here's what we're seeing and here's what we're not seeing, is just a perfect alignment into our MTSS system or a PBIS system throughout our entire district. That's been a successful process of our inclusionary practices.
Okay, so we use a universal curriculum in our program, and that the base of that is creative curriculum. And then our district uses Bridges for Math and Haggerty for Phonics, and we wanted to align with them. So we have started using that. In addition, we implement Second Step for our social emotional learning and Handwriting Without Tears for literacy. And all of our teachers do their assessments and gather data in Teaching Strategies Gold, and that helps them determine where the students are at and how they can support them individually in the classroom. All of the teachers can differentiate and individualize for all of their students in their classroom with all of these tools, so that they can meet every student's needs. And then all of our classrooms use the pyramid model framework. So we have coaches that go into the classrooms and support teachers and students with strategies. These strategies can also be sent home for the families to work on at home. Students that are at that top tier where they need intensive interventions, say they have very challenging behaviors, we, similar to our SST process, we do the PTRYC process, and that is using Prevent, Teach, Reinforce for young children. And that supports both the families and the students in the classroom, trying to kind of decrease those challenging behaviors. All of our teachers use, or all of our coaches use a teapot observation tool, where we can figure out where we can support the classroom the best with the most effective interventions first. And then our coaches use the practice-based coaching cycle to continue to support the teachers and the students in the classroom.
And this is an opportunity where the family support staff can assist not only with the school, but support the situations at home that children might need some additional supports with. So we provide additional parent education resources that families can check out and take home. That's based on the individual student needs and can marry and partner with the PTRYC program. And so when we look at the family support specialists, that's one of the unique parts about our program and other ECAP and Head Start programs across the state, is that, there's an additional individual that supports in the classrooms, get to know the families. And one of the things that we look at is we really like to compare it to an opportunity for us to take what we're learning and supporting at the school and embed it in the home environment. And so the family support staff really work alongside the families and guardians to be able to help support the child at home. And that starts from the very first phone call when they do the recruitment enrollment process. So they do the recruitment and enrollments with a special passion to work alongside families with IEPs to eliminate the barriers to enrollment. We wanted to make that process as seamless as possible for families. We didn't want them to do two separate enrollments. We wanted to connect those so that it was a very easy process for families to enroll into our preschool programs. In addition, they provide health advocacy and support, make sure children are, their health needs are met at home and they're up to date on their well childs and dentals. Again, providing all of the parent education piece and supports that families may need. We can provide some of that internally, but a lot of referrals to outside entities to support. And so that can continue beyond our building. And then in addition, we're looking at the motivational interviewing process with the mobility mentoring. So this is the system that we use with the ECAP program with all families to look at kind of the overall framework of what they're working with at home. So we like to, in the very beginning, look at their overall stability, their connection to self and others, looking at money management, where are they at with their education and job training, and any of employment and career management supports that they may need. So the family support staff work alongside the family throughout the year as a kind of a coach and providing additional resources and supports. We really look at it as a two-generational approach, knowing that when the children thrive when their home life is thriving and when their parents and guardians are thriving. So we really like to do that wraparound service so that when they leave our building and go into the gen ed programs with kindergarten and beyond, that they are as healthy and as well as they can be.
Okay, so all of our classrooms use a variety of visuals. Every classroom has a daily visual schedule that's at eye level so that students know what they're doing now and what's going to come next. This is really helpful in preventing anxiety and eliminates a lot of challenging behaviors that students can have in the classroom. There is also visuals that they use individually for a student who might need an individual schedule. There's communication boards in all of our classrooms for all students to use in different areas. So dramatic play, block area that they can use with their peers. And then we also provide a lot of visuals on calm down strategies and problem solving in the classroom so that the students know how to use those independently and they don't need as much teacher support. And social emotional learning is a giant part of our program. We use a variety of tools to help students ask a child or a friend to play, share, manage feelings, and problem solving. These a lot of times have social stories that are included, and those social stories can also be sent home for parents so that we can work on both the same skill at home and in the classroom. And then there's also individual problem solving visuals that you can see that students can use independently, or they can go get a peer to help them solve a social problem in the classroom. And lastly, all of our classrooms use a schedule within a schedule visual. This really helps students understand the beginning and the middle and the end of an activity. This helps them determine what comes next and when they're done, which for a lot of our littles really helps them prevent some of those challenging behaviors because they don't know what's coming in their day. So these can also be adapted if a student needs individual support for themselves. We have individual little visual schedules for them that align with those larger circle time easels that you see there.
Well, and looking at this, turns out a lot of it works. These are just a few of our TSG data points. First year, 23 to 24, you can see in social emotional, math, and literacy for both 4 and 3-year-olds. We have a decrease in the number of students that have fallen below the standard as the year progresses. While you focus on the cute little ones in the pictures, I just want to point out that inclusion really is the most difficult for the grown-ups. Our inclusive environments require a really collaborative and trusting team between our gen ed and special education teachers, as well as our service providers, and creating that trust in the workforce. Those intentional times to collaborate, like previously mentioned, really has been some of the most heavy work. So as we look forward, we want to most definitely celebrate student voice and our commitment to family and community engagement. We do think that there's still plenty of opportunity to grow. When we look forward, we're doing right now in this school year work to better align ourselves with our staffing and our calendar and our curriculum, similar to what Adrienne just mentioned, as it relates to our district's kindergarten. We're also considering at the state level, what does TK look like? We don't currently have TK, but we know that in the future that is a viable funding source, and we want to make sure that we're anticipating changes and making decisions that would provide us an opportunity to grow in that area if we so choose. And then lastly, our building is so full. We are almost jam-packed. And so as we look at our district's growth, we continue to partner with our district office administrators to consider where we will put our satellite programs within our existing elementary schools.
So we wanted to thank you for this opportunity to present the Central Valley Early Learning Center for a demo site with the University of Washington. We encourage you to come and have visits with us. You encourage us to contact us if you have any questions about how we do our programming, what it looks like, the tough work that we've done around the push to move to a full inclusionary model. And really just wanted to have, thank you for this opportunity that you've given us to kind of have a moment of your time.
Great. Yes, I just want to give a thank you again to Barb, Angela, Adrienne, Leslie for sharing today on behalf of your larger Central Valley community here, your inclusionary practices. And what really was resonating for me as I'm listening today and having been there and got to just experience that very this community that really centers belonging in families is that right now, as we think of our systems as P12, that these are such rich early learning for students and families, and it just sets the foundations of inclusive cultures that they have in early learning and then can expect and advocate for that going forward too. Here you go is to learn more about Central Valley and look at the slides for this recording as well as artifacts. You can visit their website, and then you can also look at other demonstration sites and see other artifacts, tip sheets, and recordings too. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you again.